So yeah, this is the first in a series of podcasts with the Royal College of Psychiatrists in Wales about mental health and the arts and how we're all coping and what perhaps drives us as artists. And I'm really excited about my first guest, Rhiannon White, who's a theatre director and all-round radical activist.
So my name's Rhiannon White, and I am a theatre maker, director, living in Cardiff, based in Cardiff where I grew up, but working across the UK, sometimes internationally. The work I make is always political, and it's site-specific, which means that it happens in spaces where theatre might not normally happen. So fan spaces, like I'm really interested in what it means to move theatre out of theatres and transform places into worlds for the audience to explore. My interest, I reckon, is pretty much about class and politics and how to tell stories that might go untold and how to kind of challenge dominant narratives and show that working class lives are complex and working class people are artists and intelligent and have lots to say about the world that we live in, and I guess give a space where people can just kind of share that and also bear witness to it. I'm interested in what happens when, I don't know, maybe we transform a community centre in our estate into something that is more of a performative space made by the people who live there. Like, what happens then? And I think that's where the interesting stuff for me is. I grew up hating the theatre and loving it at the same time. So when I was young, I was really passionate about playing, and I used to play outside on my street. So I lived in a really brilliant street. There was like a circle of houses, so we felt very safe and we could play in the street. And there was lots of kids about, so I just played with them all the time. And that basically resulted in me dressing them up in my mum's clothes and putting on plays in my garden. And it was there that I found that love of storytelling and just playing. And then when I was about 13, I went to the Sherman Youth Theatre in Cardiff. I used to catch 2 buses to get there, and I was lucky enough to get in the back door through a very long distance relative turning up and knowing how to do that. And it was there for the first time that I really became aware of my class and the fact that I grew up in a part of the city where we didn't have access to theatres like the Sherman, and where kids from my estate didn't go or didn't sound like, the kids there didn't sound like me, and they got picked up in their cars and I had to get 2 buses to get home. So it was there that kind of fire, I guess, was kind of born. And it was also there that I saw your play, Patrick, Everything Must Go, which was the first play that really spoke to me and spoke about, I guess it reflected back to me the world that I knew and that I felt. And it was, and I think for me, watching Everything Must Go really opened up loads of my practice in a way, because it really made me see that, there's lots of different things going on for working class people and for people in Wales, but actually there's so much complexities in that, and within that there's this leadership or this political awakening of young people. And where is that going to go, So it was there that I really saw something that spoke to me, which was Everything Must Go.
Just go back to when you said about taking theatre out of theatres. Was that is that a conscious effort? Because do you think theatres can be alienating spaces in a way?
I guess some theatres I really love, and some I just find really hard work. I find them quite uninspiring some places, and I guess I see theatre and like performance as activism as well, and I feel like sometimes the theatres can feel quite sterile or quite run in a certain way, or I don't know, they're difficult for me. Like, and it's not, I don't think I'm afraid of it, or the people that I make theatre with are afraid of theatres. But I feel like actually, especially in the times we live in, where all of the spaces around us are closing, like where I work, there's no youth centre. It's been closed for 5 years, and it's like, what then is our responsibility in the spaces that are empty to transform them, to see the world differently. And actually, it's amazing when you do something close to people. You know, if you work, like we did a show called No Guts, No Heart, No Glory in a boxing gym. And just the process of working in a boxing gym in Edinburgh Festival, you know, the gym was like full of, it was run by Irish travellers, these two incredible older women. And the girls who were performing in the show were from Bradford. They were young Asian girls from Bradford. And then the first ever sharing we did, we had loads of like skinhead boxers watching these girls, and they were crying and they were going, that's me, that's me, that's me. And I don't think you can ever really achieve that in a theatre, not in the same way, because you're not on like,
equality.
I don't know, it's like, it's you're on kind of a neutral ground, I guess, in the theatre. But there's so many layers to stories already in spaces that are in communities or fan spaces. So you're just adding to the history and the story of those layers, which I really like.
And also, would you say that you feel that sort of like society and what we live through has an impact on our sort of mental health? You know, subconsciously, really, I suppose you came to theatre and to act and direct because something was going on in your mind, and like as you said, you didn't have a place to go to where you lived. So, you know, and I'm thinking particularly about, say, austerity. Do you feel that is forced us into a mental health crisis, perhaps, and that theatre can sort of in a way help that in some way?
I think absolutely. I think crisis is the right word. I think it's been like, and I was saying this the other day, you know, like these times are, you know, we live in really unpredictable times now, but that unpredictability has been with us for a long time. It's just been heightened by now. So austerity has been unpredictable for many people. With, you know, I've had family members who've experienced a bedroom tax, who've been gone to ATOS meetings time and time again, and have lost everything. Family members who've overcome really bad drug addictions, and all of that I think is tied in with austerity and with the kind of pressures of society. And I mean, to be honest, like those things cross the board, you know, like you can have mental health regardless of who you are and what's you know, what you know, who you are and where you're from and what your position is and what your circumstances are. But I think it can definitely be triggered by extreme circumstances. And I think the extreme circumstances we've been living in for so long, it is going to amplify it massively. And another thing I think is, like we made a show about domestic violence. And one of the reasons for making that show was because I myself had experienced domestic violence, and also I'd been brought up in a house where I'd witnessed domestic violence as a child through the entire of my upbringing. And, you know, making that show, and of course I have some, you know, I've had to deal with that trauma in some way through my body, through my mind. And part of my process was making that show and the kind of, what's it called? You know, I found it quite cathartic in a way, but actually the process was very powerful and actually very triggering for me across those years to even remember those things. In a way, I'd suppressed those things over many times. I didn't want to think about them, but then part of me knew that if I could speak openly about them, that other people might be able to speak about that too. And if we could create something that was complex enough, that wasn't just about violence, then maybe other people would notice other signs of domestic violence within themselves. So it's quite interesting what theatre can do. I think it can unpick and unlock conversations. I don't think it changes, I think it can change the world in parts, but I think it can unlock and unpick conversations which then can change the world and help us see things differently.
One quote Arthur Miller said that he wrote plays to make people feel and alone. I just love that period of and alone. And so what you're saying really, in a way, your theatre practice has made you feel and alone in many ways in your journey. And then you hope, like you said, to create conversations so that someone watching one of your pieces will feel spoken to, really, you know, spoken not about, but almost spoken with, perhaps. Yeah.
That's a lovely way to say it. It's like maybe that's it. It's like the start of a conversation that you might, and with our glass house particularly, like we had a sign on the back of the house, so you would look out the window and you would see the sign, and the sign said, "You are here as a witness." And something for me with the work is about that. It's about bearing witness to stories that are built on actual real stories, and that continue to grow. Those stories continue to change and grow, and if they can connect with someone in even the smallest way, and they can see a part of themselves and more, then that's the job done for me. I don't ever want to make theatre that doesn't speak beyond that, you know.
Are you saying that you are fearful that a lot of, say, theatre does that? It's almost like spectacle, and so like a product in a way. And you wanted to change the narrative of that, would you say?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess theatre has got lots of, there's lots of different types of theatre, and there's theatre that is definitely like the theatre industry is very elitist and is very centered around, I would say, middle class leadership, which then results in the telling of maybe more middle class stories, or the representation of people who have similar lives to me who might be working class being told by middle class people, which is problematic for me, because I think when you make a piece of work, you really have to ask yourself who on your team has that experience that you're talking about. Not that it has to be that binary, but it has to, I think really, when you get to the complexities of things, you have to really start to understand what that is. And on top of that, you'll have to understand what impact that's going to have on the people whose story you're telling in that way. So I think I'm less interested in commercial theatre, and I know there's a place for that. I'm less interested in theatre being made for the kind of elite industry that it serves for other artists, or whatever that looks like. But what I am interested in, how theatre can be, I guess, like a catalyst for social change. And actually what I feel frustrated about, I would say, is that in the place that I work, which is in the east of Cardiff, where I grew up, there's a lot of talent, but it's rarely recognised by the art sector or by other professionals. And then also the people with that talent are really, burdened by work, by family life, by everything they've got to do. So then there's this constant battle of like, okay, I've got to do that, and I haven't got time for this. And what I'm trying to do is like find a way of making that time more accessible for people, because I'm really interested in what people have to say from that place, from that background. Because I think once that happens, the art world is going to change massively, because the narrative changes.
Of course, it's not saying that middle class people or upper class people don't have mental health problems, of course, or issues, of course. But as you said, it's almost like working class stories are something told by never experienced that, and so they're inauthentic, perhaps. And the infrastructure, say, different to, say, bands, where theatre has got a sort of a elitist hierarchy, so certain stories are neglected. And
I think it's that thing of, like, for me, with the theatre, it's like the whole experience. So it's not just like watching a show, it's like also like what happens when you go into that building. How do you feel when you go into the building? What does it make you feel like? What does your body do? Like how is it in the audience? What's the response of sitting with everyone? Like I worked on a show with a young man who went to the art centre that I was working in for the very first time, and he absolutely loved it. He wasn't scared at all by the building, because lots of people think the buildings are scary, and to some people they might be. That's not to say that. And he went into the building and he said, "Oh, I love it here because everyone's just being themselves, and they can wear what they want and they can be who they want, and that's really different to where I grew up." Yeah. And then at the end, and it was the first night he did the show, he loved it, he was on a real high. And when he left the show, he walked out into the car park and he watched an old woman fall out of her car, as she was getting in, and he ran over to help her, and she started shouting, thinking that he was going to rob her. So this is the kind of thing we're up against, of like, if we want the arts and theatre to be representative truly, we have to start kind of looking at society as a whole and our own judgments and preconceptions of people.
One of the questions I was asking everyone is about, I suppose, if you would like to choose a song or a poem or a theatre, film, something that in a way, you have mentioned everything must go, I know, but I'm sure there's a lot more. So thank you for that. But, which is, and at 16 and 17, of course, we don't think it's for our mental health. We are gravitating towards a guitar noise or a line in the poem. But I wonder if there was something you could choose, which is in a way, perhaps you still read, watch, look at now, that has given you something along your way, and perhaps what did it do to you?
I would probably choose an artist, like a musician. I really love music. I think music inspires me more than theatre. I think it can hit me really deeply emotionally, and I like really sad music. I don't really, and I go there, and when my own mental health is challenged or changing in some way, I find a lot of comfort in exploring my emotions, I guess, through music and feeling. And an artist that I've been listening to a lot over the past year is an artist called Kojay Radical. He's a hip hop artist from East London, and he speaks very openly about his mental health and depression. And he's a young man. He's like 26. He grew up in East London. He is a visual artist as well as being a musician in his own right. And I guess like the music, the reason I like it, I really like words and I really like lyrics. And he plays with a band, so he really explores all the different genres. So it's not just hip hop, but he might like take influences from punk music, from ska music, from reggae to blues to soul music, and he fuses it all together, and it feels new and it feels fresh, and it feels, I guess the thing it feels mostly is it feels like it's from its guts, like it's his guts. It feels really like every track that I ever listened to feels like a real call to arms. And the song that I love the most is called Kwame Nkrumah, which is a track about a Ghanaian revolutionary. So Kojay Radical is from Ghana. And, I didn't know anything about him. And then listening to the track, I started learning about the politics of Ghana and his history. And I guess what I feel is inspiring about the song is that it's almost like his call to arms, like his history, and him sharing that history with us, and his kind of ambition to overcome his mental health, to be a leader and to be recognized, and to be to recognize his own kind of confidence in himself. And it feels like a battle cry, like he can do it. So I really like it. I feel like it's a journey every time I listen to it. So I would definitely say Kojay Radical is an inspiration. And actually he's a very interesting one to look at, because he's just done a really amazing track called I'm So Proud of You for this time. So he's asked 100 people to contribute to the track, and they've just been contributing via Instagram, and it's about celebrating the positive things in our life. So he's done that for Mental Health Week. So it's kind of challenging the things that we might think very negatively in our lives, and how we find those things, even the smallest things, that we're proud of.
Okay, thank you. Leads me on perfectly to the next question, which is really, there's been a lot of talk, a lot of these sort of Skype, Zoom podcasts, etc., with people learning things, I suppose, about themselves during this time. Is there anything that you've learned about yourself, perhaps?
I think the thing that it's made me realise the most is how fast everything was moving, and I'm sure it's the same for most people, and how much I needed to stop and slow down in my own mind, because I was experiencing quite a lot of anxiety before this, just because I was being pulled from pillar to post. I had a lot of personal things going on, and I guess sorry,
artistically pulled,
Artistically pulled, family pulled, like lots of different kind of things going on that was really challenging me and making me feel like my self-confidence and self-esteem wasn't where I'd like it to be. And yeah, just getting a lot of, like, I felt very like much in my head, like there was no way to find it out, like out for it, and just thinking about work all the time or about troubles. So I guess like this time has really helped me to notice when I feel like that, and maybe like what I can do to release some of that. So I guess one thing that I've started doing is running, and I've never been into sport. Like I was totally the girl at school that never did sport. I would always have a note. And I started doing the couch to 5K, and it's amazing. So I did it the other day. I was crying. I was really angry. I was really frustrated. I went for a run, and poof, it was like clear. I could think, I could breathe. And I think it's that for me, this time's been about taking stock, bearing witness to things unfolding, seeing how I can best be of use to myself and the people that I love around me, and then how I can manage my own mental health, and also how I can manage the things I need to do on a day-to-day basis.
And that will hopefully have ripples out into your own artistic creation as well then, I suppose, and time out as well from creating to,
I think it's that thing of like, I think the realization for me that things aren't immediate. So just the starting of the running is something that I absolutely hate. And then I go, oh, actually it's free to do, and I can just experiment with this a little bit. It might not work, but it's like sometimes getting off the seat is the hardest thing to do. And like once you're off the seat and you're giving it a try, just experimenting with what that feels like for you, because I guess there's going to be something for everyone, and it might not be running, it might be yoga, or it might be painting, or it might be writing, or it might be bird watching. It could be anything, but just experimenting with the different things till you find your kind of free point, where you can free your mind into a more peaceful place is really useful.
Which is interesting, really, because the pressures we live in under are quite anxiety-inducing. Death, is all around us. Terrible stories of people not being able to see their loved ones, and yet, like what you're saying, in a way, there's a sense of like reclaiming a life as well under these terrible circumstances.
Totally. And it's that, because I think also what it's made me realize is how the digital world is absolutely stealing our time from us. How much anxiety though the digital world can cause. I had to delete Facebook and not have all of that noise. I think that contributed to my anxiety, is that like crazy constant, like having to be switched on, having to be present, having to say something. And then I just thought, what happens if you don't say anything? The world doesn't stop tomorrow, like what happens if you step back? What happens if you just concentrate on yourself for a little bit?
Yeah, but I suppose the other side of that is that as artists, what do we do when we don't create, I suppose, as well? So I suppose it is that I totally understand what you're saying. I would go on Twitter and just think, oh my God, I'm not doing this. I am written a poem for this. I'm a failure, as well. There's that. But then I suppose the other side of it is, what do we do with our time if we're not creating? I sometimes feel totally useless to the world. So I feel, so it's a balance really, I suppose, isn't it?
And maybe as artists, and maybe as people who don't think they're artists yet, but they are artists, for them and for all of us, my invitation would be just to look at the world around you and feel inspired by it, because so much is happening so quickly and it's so hard to process. But even the smallest things I'm getting really inspired by. I'm inspired by my dad texting me every morning about the politics, or I'm inspired by finding old artifacts on the beaches of Cardiff, or going for long walks in nature. That's the best inspiration that I could ask for at the moment. And not putting too much pressure on ourselves feels really important. The pressure like you talk about on Twitter, because it's really easy for people to talk about all the great things they're doing, and you just wonder who's listening to that and why we're listening to that. But actually, great things will come from from times like this. Like I truly believe that great art will be made, but it'll be made when we're really listening. Otherwise, it's just going to be more noise.
In our initial communication, when I asked him some of these questions, you mentioned a poem by Mary Oliver, Wild Geese. Is that right? Yeah. As you're talking there, I'm thinking about those lines in there where she talks about that sort of stopping and noticing and the wild geese and the world accepting you in the family of things. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful line, that is, isn't it? Was that a poem recently you discovered or something along the way? Yeah. And what does that say to you?
What does it say to me? It says, I was passed the poem by a friend called Shilpa, and what it did for me was as much as like a walk to the seaside would do for me. Like it absolutely gives me so much perspective just in words. And that's all I needed in that moment. It was like a tonic. So it talks about us in relationship to nature, basically, and it feels like it goes from small to really, really big, and then you go, oh, okay, I'm just one part of this crazy, this massive picture, this massive world. And that's what I need all the time. I need to remember perspective. And I think, if you spend a lot of time working alone or just being like in your own thoughts and you're just constant and you don't realize the layers and the kind of scale of things, I think it's really easy to feel isolated and trapped more than we are at the moment. That can actually, what Mary Oliver does is give me the space that I need to just go, okay. It kind of makes me feel like it relaxes me, and it makes me feel like it's a release, like actually it's all right. I don't have to do all these things. Like actually trust myself a little bit more, trust my path and my instinct and my place in this world, and it's going to be all right.
Fantastic. I think you sort of summed up the ethos a bit of these podcasts really with that then. So my final question really is to younger artists, or not even younger, people who are just, like you said, discovering art and finding their voice. What would you say your advice is?
I think I would say just know you've got a story to tell, and that story is important, and people are waiting to listen to it. Don't wait to ask for permission from anybody. And as much as you can, just find your tribe, find your friends, or find your place in what you want to do, and just keep practicing and working on how you want to share that story, and the biggest thing, and I'm still fighting this now, is that feeling of doubt and feeling of fear. So sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I can't write. I can't do that. I can't write. But actually I can write. I just write, and it might be rubbish the first page, and then the next page will be better, and the next page again will be better. So it's like going past the doubt and realizing that actually we've all got pure potential in us, and those stories are waiting to be told. Don't let other people tell your story. You can tell it.
Thank you very much, Rhiannon, for chatting today. That has just flown by, really, and I'm getting quite into this now.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks.